Men and women both deal with insulin resistance, but women deal with it a little bit different. So I've got a few things that you can try for you specifically. First, aerobic exercise is probably more powerful for women when it comes down to insulin resistance than for men. There was a paper that was published in the journal Diabetes Care that took a look at resistance training, aerobic training, and a combination, resistance and aerobic training, on insulin-resistant individuals, in this case women. And they found that all of them worked well. All of them worked really well when it came down to glucose disposal, when it came down to just burning up extra glucose. But it seems as though the combination of a couple days per week of resistance training to build muscle density, and then the rest of the time focusing on like full body aerobic work, seemed to work very, very well when it came down to glucose management for women. Now, this is kind of thrown in the face of a lot of people out there in social media that say women should just focus on resistance training, and I think that's important. But I think you need to be tilted slightly towards the side of more aerobic and a slight bit less resistance training than your male counterparts. So you're skewed this way, they're skewed this way. That's very important. You can't neglect your cardio. And it has to do with the fact that you might have more inter and intracellular lipids. Okay, these are fats that are sort of weaved into your muscle tissue. And when you do aerobic exercise, you tap into those and burn those more. If you have too much of this fat in the muscle tissue, it can lead to more insulin resistance. It ends up making so that insulin signaling is thrown off. Okay, so it would be advantageous for you to maybe do something like 3 days to 4 days per week of resistance training, but more importantly, do more like 4 days per week of some kind of low intensity aerobic work. It just needs to be the focus for you. The second thing we have to focus on is more so talking about the relationship between PCOS and insulin resistance. What's interesting is not everyone's diagnosed with insulin resistance. Not everyone's diagnosed with PCOS, but a lot of women have it and goes unnoticed, right? 30 to 40% of women with PCOS also have insulin resistance. Now, what's interesting is PCOS a risk factor for insulin resistance, or is insulin resistance actually a cause for PCOS? I have my opinions on this, but we don't really know just yet. The thing is, more and more women are getting diagnosed with PCOS, or at least showing symptoms of it, but when they do test for insulin resistance, lo and behold, a lot of them are insulin resistant too. What happens is insulin resistance alongside obesity or just being overweight in general leads to an increase in these androgenic hormones. These androgenic hormones are like the opposite of estrogen. And this can lead to PCOS because you have an imbalance of basically androgenic hormones. Here's what's really wild though. The dietary guidance for PCOS and the dietary guidance for insulin resistance are the exact same. And they don't even talk to each other. This is like happening independently. This diet's really good for PCOS. Just so happens this diet's really good for insulin resistance. Just so happens they're the same thing. So that's just food for thought there. Now, that was a precursor to this very important one, number 2. You might want to consider increasing estrogen. And we live in a world where everyone's telling us, decrease estrogen. We have so much external xenoestrogens and phytoestrogens, and that's not wrong. We really do. But especially as women get older, you have to pay very close attention to your estrogen levels and what's happening there. There was a study that was published in Reproductive Sciences, very interesting paper, took a look at pre- and post-menopausal women. Okay, it gave them an insulin tolerance test where they tested basically their insulin, and then it gave them a glucose tolerance test, how much they could handle glucose. Okay, and then it put them on either a progestin and estrogen pill or an estrogen-only pill. And then they measured their ITT, their insulin, and their glucose tolerance at 2 and 6 months. Results were very interesting. Now, researchers noted that before any intervention, post-menopausal women ended up having less insulin sensitivity. So post-menopausal, women were more likely to develop insulin resistance. But when women were given estrogen treatment, their insulin sensitivity improved. Okay, so there seems to be a correlation between estrogen levels and insulin sensitivity in a very good way. So for that, we look at another paper that was published in Diabetes, this one done in mice, so we could look a little more mechanistically. So what they did is they took 2 sets of mice, regular mice and mice that had a specific gene called FOXO1 knocked out, which means they got rid of this one gene, okay? Well, what happens is they gave these mice estrogen. They found that the regular mice improved insulin sensitivity and ultimately got healthier when their estrogen was higher, okay? But the mice that had the FOXO1 gene knocked out didn't have any effect from the estrogen. What does this tell us? It sounds like complicated science. Well, what it explains to us is that there is a pathway that we recognize. So there is a reason. What this is a reason, a validation to look at these human models more. We see, when estrogen increases, insulin sensitivity improves. And when we notice that there actually is a pathway, we can validate that. So what do we do? Well, simple things like, you could probably eat more like phytoestrogenic foods that might help if you're low estrogen, flax, sesame. It's not going to do much if you're already moderate or high levels of estrogen, but if you're low, it could bring those levels up a little bit more because it can help circulating estrogen because they're mimickers. But one of the most important things you could probably do is get enough vitamin D, get enough vitamin B, the full range, okay? Really focus on those. Cod liver oil, things like that for vitamin D, as much as you can to really safely get it up there. But additionally, 5 or 10 milligrams of DHEA, that's a precursor to estrogen and very powerful in women. So if you're low estrogen, you might find a little bit of DHEA helps your insulin sensitivity. Now, as far as getting levels of estrogen up, black cohosh and chasteberry are also really, really good compounds, but I would recommend taking it alongside a little DHEA. I also put a link down below for Thrive Market, which has some of these things. So Thrive Market has supplements you can get, but they also have a place where you can get like the flax, you can get sesame seeds, you can get the stuff I'm talking about, the chasteberry, stuff like that. So all that stuff, whatever you want to get, is available through Thrive Market because it's basically a grocery store. And that link down there will get you 30% off your entire grocery order. So 30% off whatever you get, whether you're getting food, whether you're getting frozen food, whether you're getting meat and seafood, whether you're getting supplements, whatever, 30% off your entire order. And you get a $50 free gift when you use that special link down below. So it's a special exclusive link for people that watch my videos down below in the description. So check them out after this video. Now, this third one is very interesting. Women perceive stress different from men. There's research and literature that backs up the fact that women often have a higher level of perceived stress than men. What that means is that you could put a man and a woman in a very similar situation. Women tend to perceive stress differently than men. So there's things that men might find stressful that women don't. There's things that women find stressful that men don't. But women often have a higher perceived level of stress, which means that their sleep is impacted more so. So there was a study in PLOS-1 that found that women just sleep worse than men, independent of stress, independent of lifestyle. They are just wired to sleep worse. So women, you have this argument against the men in your life. You could say like, hey, I just naturally don't sleep as good. I mean, everyone likes to kind of play the victim sometimes, say, I didn't sleep good, I slept worse than you. But women, you probably slept worse. And the reality is that this plays a very, very big role in insulin resistance. And there was a brand new study in 2022 that took a look at this, and it demonstrated that the lack of sleep, it was a 10-study meta-analysis, looked at a lot of data. The lack of sleep leads to an increase in inflammation, which leads to a disruption of circadian rhythms, which leads to insulin resistance. So what do we do about this? With women specifically, I do find that women are usually lacking the protein needed. If you're in the fitness or health space, you probably consume enough protein, but by and large, I notice that women just don't consume enough protein. And if you start increasing your protein towards the end of the day and you increase the availability of the circulating tryptophan, you might just be able to increase serotonin, which will calm you down, and increase melatonin and help you sleep. So, I mean, personal anecdotal experience, I've really encouraged like my wife to increase her protein with dinner, and it seems to help her sleep. That's purely anecdotal, but I noticed this pattern with women. So give it a shot, it's worth it. Now, number 4, this sounds like something generic, but hear me out because it's very important, okay? It's probably even more important for women to lose weight than men when it comes to insulin resistance. Men still need to lose weight, don't get me wrong, but men can probably improve insulin resistance by becoming more active and things like that. Women, it becomes extra important that you lose the weight. What we have to remember is that when you have insulin resistance, you have high levels of circulating insulin. Okay, that circulating insulin stops fat loss from occurring. Okay, it actually inhibits what's called lipolysis. So the insulin circulating stops fat loss from happening. But when you also are obese or overweight, you have non-esterified fatty acids that are circulating too. And these non-esterified fatty acids inhibit insulin signaling. So you have high levels of insulin circulating with nowhere for it to really go. And we look at a paper published in PLOS-1, and it demonstrated that women over the age of 30 gain weight easier than men. Okay, now it could have something to do with hormones, could have a lot of different things going on there. But the bottom line is that women are more prone to weight gain over 30, which means they need to be paying extra close attention. You need to watch out for this because of that increase in weight gain that's more powerful than it is in men, you run the risk of developing more insulin resistance quicker. What's interesting is there is an enzyme, this is very important, an enzyme called ALDH1A1. You don't have to remember that, there's not going to be a test. But this enzyme leads to more visceral fat accumulation and leads to fat accumulation in the first place. Very bad things for insulin resistance, very bad things for inflammation. Women have estrogen, obviously. Estrogen inhibits this enzyme. So estrogen blocks ALDH1A1. So that means as long as estrogen levels are decently high, this enzyme's not causing a problem. But once you get older and weight increases and estrogen goes down, this enzyme rears its ugly head because it's no longer being suppressed by estrogen, and it leads to visceral fat accumulation, and it leads to fat accumulation in the first place, which are very big pieces for insulin resistance. This is one of those times where, regardless of your diet, I think it's really important for women to try like a 12 or 14-hour fast just to be able to get their body a little more insulin sensitive and also get their body a little bit more fat adapted. I stand behind this. I know there's literature that says, yes, lose weight, calories in, calories out. I understand that and I'm not negating that, but I do find that when women are in this tough spot, and I've noticed it for years, that when they do little bits of like 14-hour fasts, just a few days a week, short fasts, it really does make a huge improvement in their weight loss. And maybe that's just what you need. Maybe that's the impetus that you need to get started and lose that weight and kickstart that insulin sensitivity again. So a little bit of fasting, along with some estrogen, along with doing the right things, the aerobic activity, possibly 5 or 10 milligrams of DHEA, you could be sitting in a good spot in a couple of months.